Welcome to Group Chat, a show on two-way where the ethos is peace, love, and understanding, and the presumption of grace for all. If you are joining us on the two-way platform, we see a lot of you here and want to join the conversation. Please do raise your digital hand, and we will bring you into the conversation. We want this conversation to be very heavily focused on you. We're going to each give our opinions about the topic, which is 2028, but we really want to get a lot of you into the conversation. So we really hope you'll join in. I am joined by my co-host, as always, moderate Democrat Dan Turrentine, conservative Emma Jo Morris, progressive Nina Turner, and libertarian Robby Soave. And what we're going to be discussing for the next hour is what should you all be watching for in 2028? What are we watching for? And who do we think are some of the kind of sleeper stars out there that are maybe not getting as much attention as they should be? So let's look at number one. Here are some names that have been floated as potential GOP successors to Donald Trump. We've got J.D. Vance, the vice president. We've got Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. Ron DeSantis, who ran against Trump. Kristi Noem, Glenn Youngkin, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Greg Abbott. Not sure if they're going to be on anybody's scorecards. And now let's look at number three. Here are some names of some 2028 Democrats. We've got Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore, Pete Buttigieg, Josh Shapiro, J.B. Pritzker, and then Ruben Gallego. I think I was the one who threw him into the mix. So we're going to each go around and say what we think you should be looking for, what we're looking for towards 2028. We're each going to talk about who we think is a standout candidate, and then we are going to bring you all in. So let's start with you, Emma. What are you looking for? What are you watching for thinking about 2028?
I definitely think that, I don't even think it's a black swan. It's the slowest moving and most obvious black swan that I don't know if I can fairly call it that, but it's something that I don't think gets any conversation, which is tech and AI. That is a runaway train, and nobody is really giving it, I don't think, the right attention. I know that Trump has like a committee or something that's dedicated to talking about it or thinking about it, or I don't know, maybe having a conversation at some point. But we haven't really seen much from them. And in the meantime, this thing is way more advanced and way more, let's say, threatening disruption at a faster rate than I think we are kind of grappling with right now. So I think that gives
specifically like deep fakes and that kind of a thing, or
no LLMs, chatbots, ChatGPT, that can do white collar jobs very well. And it can definitely do entry level white collar jobs very well. And that's today, let alone in 4 years from now. This stuff is advancing by month, like leaps and bounds by month. So I think JD has an edge on that because he has a very good grasp of it. The people around him obviously are, in some cases, the ones developing it. And it's going to be something that is, if we're smart and we care about our country and we care about our workers, we will be talking about it, talking about regulation or not, but at least trying to get our arms around it, which I don't see us doing at all.
Dan.
So I'm watching kind of one in each, in the D and the R. On the Republican side, I'm really curious, does Donald Trump allow it to be a coronation and for J.D. Vance to just kind of seamlessly take the torch? His history is he likes people to beg him, kind of everyone have to kind of come before the king in the court, apprentice style, and like please him. So that would, make me believe that maybe he's going to try to stir it up a little bit. The second part is, does Trump want 2028 to be all about Donald Trump? Which I could easily see him kind of insisting that JD, like it's really about Trump. I am kind of still to some extent on the ballot, which would put JD Vance in a little bit of a box. On our side, I am watching all these primaries, like the state of Michigan, open Senate seat. You have a progressive, you have kind of a quasi-progressive, you have a conservative in Haley Stevens. Who wins these races? We just talked to, New York City's happened. Who emerges? The old guard, new guard. And then which of the 2028 candidates can kind of, to some level, mimic Mamdani's like strategy and tactics his style, his comfort, his ability to use social media, to be comfortable in his own skin, to really focus like a laser beam on helping people and addressing their concerns. But in my opinion, kind of has a little bit more polish to, I think, be a more credible national candidate. Maybe I'm wrong, because the most popular candidates, AOC, Sanders, and Mamdani, they all had the same thing: comfortable in their own skin, bold policy positions, and willing to kind of go there.
Nina.
And definitely authenticity is the key. Whether people believe in what you believe, they know if you're being authentic or not. And to Emma Jo's point, I definitely agree with her on the AI stuff. It's just reminding me that, NAFTA, CAFTA, those kinds of trade deals and how they hurt workers in the Midwest are politically driven, but people were not ready for that. And even when we think about as a world, but particularly as a nation, as we moved into the Industrial Revolution, I mean, I know I'm going back a little bit,
Yeah.
but those kinds of things start to change. What is the impact to the average everyday worker? And we do need a group of people, not just one person running for president, to really care about that. My position on 2028 is that anybody that's thinking about 2028, I'm not really paying attention to them, because there's so much that needs to be talked about and done right now. I want to see how serious you are about 2025, 2026, 2027 before I jump to 2028, because people need leaders who are looking right now. I hate when electeds are called superstars or rising stars. And no, you're not supposed to be a rising star. You're supposed to be somebody that is out there running to change the material conditions of the people of this country. So even though I know as a matter of practice, we're gonna tease some people out there, my position is I got my eye on them to see what kind of work, not campaigning, work they are going to do right now before they get to 2028. But since you do have a list, we have a list going. I didn't see Rokana's name on that list. I want to throw Rokana's name on that list. Hell, I'm gonna throw my own name on that list.
I was gonna ask
Never
Nina.
know. So let me throw my name on the list too.
Heard it here
All right,
first.
if you declare, you need to do it on a group chat.
On two-way.
Yeah, exactly.
Dan.
I have been asked. I'm asked quite often, as a matter of fact. So I just want to,
If asked, you would serve. Okay.
Robby, before we get to you, Nina, can I ask you, are you more or less worried that a progressive candidate in 2028 is going to face what Senator Sanders faced in 2016 and 2020? Like, do you think that's less likely that the DNC will capture things and pull it towards the moderate? Or do you think that's less likely now, perhaps even after the Mamdani victory?
Less likely, but still possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll never be fully, because the levers, despite who, we got a new chair now. Well, not we, the Democrats have a new chair now. However, the powers that be are still pretty much the same, and they do things. I don't know how many of you remember, and I would say Emma Jo has to be part of my campaign if I do that. Let me throw that out there.
Well, yeah.
I want to say
it has to serve.
I think that ticket. I think the two of you, great ticket.
The example I wanted to give is that India Walton, some of you may be familiar, she ran in Buffalo and she won a primary. She won the primary as the Democratic nominee, and the Democratic establishment found a way to run the incumbent mayor. They had some kind of rule where he could run on a different line, and he ran against her in the general, and they snatched it from her.
Oh,
so Batya, less likely, but I'm still
likely.
But Nina, let me ask you a question though. Do you think that if the party tried to do something like they did to Sanders in 16 and 20, that it would backfire now? Like, think about the fact that Bloomberg and Clinton and all these people came out. I feel like every time they came in for Cuomo, it was fuel to the fire for Mamdani to say, they're trying to stop me, right? Not you, not the people on the street, these bigwig institutional powers with their money and everything. Like, I think now it would be the single worst thing. I'd be like, don't help me.
The circumstances matter, the climate matters. I would say that Madani benefited from, like, his win didn't come from nowhere. People
Yeah,
forget
totally.
Senator Sanders paved the way in
Yep.
2016, 2020. I paved the way when I ran in 21 and 22, and others who took the hits, so that by the time we got to this moment in time, he had a greater chance and a greater likelihood. And to your point, Dan, it will be harder, not impossible, but it will be harder for the establishment to try to do exactly to whoever, if there is a progressive in 2028, as they were able to do to Senator Sanders and people like me all across the country. India Walton, we're not the only ones. We're just the names that people know, but the establishment has done that in many, many Democratic primaries.
Robby, what are you looking towards in 2028?
Well, on the Republican side, I mean, I think it's absolutely going to just be Vance to such a degree that it's not even interesting to talk about. I think the choice of Vance was essentially the choice of a successor. Now, that doesn't mean it's a guarantee. A variety of things could happen. He could somehow lose favor with Trump. I don't think that's very likely at all. Vance seems very skilled at representing, being a spokesperson for Trumpism. Marco Rubio might be in the mix. I think it's incredibly, Vance could decide, who knows? He could decide he doesn't want it. I think that's also unlikely. I think it's going to be Vance. Other people I would like to see take prominence on the Republican side who aren't like explicitly my ideology. Obviously, I want like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie to run everything because they're the only two Republican figures I agree with almost entirely, but that's never going to happen because they're at odds with Trump half the time. So the figure I always like to, put forth who is on good terms with Trump and I think is a good steward of conservatism is actually Doug Burgum, who does have a tech background and tech knowledge, who's it wants to be involved in making more land able to be developed on, more energy, talks about the need for energy abundance, especially to be able to do the computing power that is going to be necessary in the AI, in the crypto future. I like the things he has to say about that, and I'm always happy to have him more involved in Republican politics. On the Democratic side, the big question is whether Kamala wants to go for it again. I can't believe she maybe does, but it sounds like she does. And if she does, she would be sort of a very weak front runner-ish.
Sort of.
I don't know. She would be because she'd have the most name recognition of anyone, but also she had no ability to actually win the nomination of her own and was just given it to her at the last minute. I think the Democrats would be insane to nominate someone who is not the governor of one of the critical Midwestern swing states, frankly. And you actually have two who are always in contention, Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer. Again, I despise Gretchen Whitmer. I have nothing specifically against Josh Shapiro, so I would rather it be him, but I'm not a Democratic person of any note, so it doesn't matter what I think.
Emma, assuming Kamala Harris is like the best case scenario for the right, which Democrat are you most worried will win because you think they would actually have a shot?
Well, we didn't talk about the other Republican that I think is going to be around.
Who's that?
Bannon.
All right.
Oh, well, making news here. All right.
I'm not making anything. I'm just thinking. And no.
Okay.
An informed thought,
I get paid to
perhaps.
give my.
Do you think he would be a strong candidate for the right?
Yeah. I mean, he's pretty intense. He knows the issues very, very well. He is very much in touch with the base. He is very keyed into their feelings, for better or worse. And he helped Trump win in 2016, which was when the stakes were highest.
So Emma,
Wait,
a series
Emma,
of facts.
Well, I want you to answer my question. Which Democrat would you?
Right, and then I would be probably most worried about. Ro Khanna would freak me out.
Oh, okay, Dan.
Well, hold on, Emma Jo. If Trump says, "Steve, don't do this," but he's done. He's now, that's it. He can't be president again. Trump's getting older. Does Bannon back off in your opinion, this is speculation, of course, would he still go? Because I think I mean, that would be fascinating if you're Vance and
Great
someone's
point.
coming at you from the right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that could happen again. Like, I don't know. Like, honestly, I don't know. I'm not like being like, I know something. I don't. I'm just like aware of like what's going on in MAGA, and like Bannon is absolutely a fixture in MAGA. He is absolutely a leader. And he has a very intimate relationship with the base in a way that I don't know that anybody else around has. And I think that that would be really important in a primary. Again, like I don't know if he's president at the end of it. I don't know if he decides to run. I don't know, but I just know like he is like he exists, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if Trump tell him to back off? I mean, why would he like just to entertain this and like kind of flesh it out for a second for conversation's sake. Does Trump like necessarily have somebody that he wants to coronate? What would be the reasons for that?
Yeah, that's what I
It's
wonder.
like, oh, ego. But like, I don't know about that. I think that like let's say what does Trump care about most? If he's involving himself, he cares about his legacy. What matters most to his legacy? The strongest person running on behalf of his platform.
And do you
So
think
coronating somebody, as Trump knows, would not produce the strongest candidate.
Emma, do you think that Bannon would be the strongest candidate?
I don't know. Like, I don't know what the vibe is going to be then. It's too early to say, but I think that he, like I said, like I think he has a really intimate relationship and a really good relationship with the base. I think he's obviously a very strong person. He's strong-minded, and he is very expressive in that. He's good at expressing himself. He's good at articulating the concerns of MAGA. And he's a very smart person.
But
Let's
I
bring Drew. Yes, go ahead, Nina.
want to just go back to something, Robbie, when you said that most JD Vance, and then you parsed it and said if he stays in the good graces of the president. I wanted to know when as soon as you said that, it made me think about Vice President Pence. How did he fall out of good grace? Because even though he is not as, kind of savvy as JD Vance, I thought Vice President Pence did everything that President Trump wanted him to do, and then all of a sudden he was out of his good graces.
Well, until January 5th, 2021, Mike Pence was the most likely successor to Donald Trump at the time period where Donald Trump was going to leave politics. But Donald Trump didn't leave politics just then. And then a little thing happened the next day, and that just ruined his reputation with MAGA. So something like that could happen to Vance. You can't rule it out entirely. I don't think it's a very likely outcome. I think Vance is too politically savvy to avoid that. Even in that he has some policy differences with Trump, it's more about he's trying to steer Trump toward his policy choices without ever doing some kind of hard break. He'll even, behind the scenes, he's clearly more committed to non-interventionism than some members of his administration. And he's trying to steer Trump that way, but it's not about, I disagree with the president on this. You'll never hear those words out.
Well, but you know what though, for Robby, Batya, and Emma Joe, let's say that Trump is popular with the base still, but people are looking at the polls. You're not sure if like just running straight Trump again, so to speak, for a third or a fourth term to some extent is popular. And you go to JD Vance and you say, you got to break with him in some places. The average the president sitting there says, look, you kind of got to do what you got to do. I don't love it, but like, fine. Does anyone think Trump says, JD, you got to separate yourself?
He doesn't.
Okay.
JD is too clever to see it in a binary way like that. Yes, I think definitely that JD himself, he won't need to be told. JD himself will understand that he needs to be JD Vance, not like Trump Jr.,
And you think Trump lets him do that?
Well, I was just going to say though, just can I have 1 second? His way of doing that though will not be to distinguish himself by breaking from Trump and saying, I say the opposite of you on this specific thing. It will be taking the next generation of issues. Like I said, like he has a really good grasp on tech and AI. He also has a really good and interesting perspective about family formation that Trump hasn't really talked about much, So JD will have his own issues that won't require him to undermine Trump on past issues.
Drew, please unmute yourself. Tell us where you are and what your thoughts are on about 2028.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been on the morning meeting maybe once or twice, so definitely happy to be a part of this group chat. First, I want to say is Nina, I typically do not agree with you on almost anything you say, but I did love your point in the beginning of this conversation where you said, I'm not so much focused on 2028, but what are you doing for me now? I think that's a huge thing that doesn't get talked about enough. And so a lot of credit to you. The second thing that I want to say is mostly about the mayoral election in New York. Is do you guys believe? First question is, do you believe? And I think you kind of asked it. Is are Democrats really going to embrace this socialist type of movement? It's going for this younger crowd, and kind of when I was on the morning meeting, was kind of putting some comments in the chat. Is that this younger generation? I think like the one thing that a lot of politicians don't really talk about. I think the Biden administration tried to go for is you're essentially starting behind an eight ball if you're going to college nowadays. You're really just gaining a lot of debt. You know you could have at least 50K if not more in debt, and then you're trying to go get a job. You might not like the job, but you're forced to stuck with it and to pay these loans. You kind of have to do it. So that's my first question: is do you think that this populist slash socialist movement from the Democrats is going to be kind of the counter to Trump? And then second, with JD Vance, I guess it's more of a comment slash than a question is, I think a lot of people are really trying to tie him to Trump, and he is going to be tied to Trump. But Dan, I will say is just from what I've seen so far, is JD seems to really be able to hug onto Trump and be an advocate for him. But at the same time, he's been very articulate with his own opinions. There's been some times where you can almost see there's a contradiction of JD will say something, people will then go to Trump, and he'll kind of try and say, oh, well, that's JD's thoughts. So I will say is I do think that eventually JD is going to truly embrace MAGA and Trumpism, and he's already doing so. But I think he is so articulate and well educated that he's going to be able to have his own message, his own thoughts, and really push through that. You just won't see it until you start getting closer to that 2028 election.
So Dan, let's have you respond to Drew, and then we're going to bring in Margaret.
Sure. So I mean, I think, look, I totally agree. I think JD Vance is a wonderful political athlete. What I just keep wondering is, what does Donald Trump, it's just his raging ego, it has to be about him, allow? On the second part, I don't know if his message of, having government-run grocery stores and free childcare, yes, it's popular, but if a Democrat were to run on, he's proposing to raise taxes by $10 billion in New York. So if you kind of extrapolated that out, some sort of tax increase of $1 trillion, and we're going to provide all these services. I don't know if that is a winning message. I do think him focusing like a laser beam on things that matter to voters, which Harris never did, is a huge thing that Democrats can take with them. But one of the things I was going to ask Nina, which is kind of related, is, do you think, is Bernie Sanders completely closed the door, in your opinion, to running again in 28?
Yeah, I think so.
You do? Okay.
Is it because of his age?
I mean, that's part of it. I mean, he is spry is all, get up. I mean, when I say keeping up with him, this was real. This wasn't no spin. When Kareem said that, it was a total lie. I was on both of his presidential campaigns, and people see Senator Sanders and how he comports himself. I think if the good Lord continues to give him that spryness, so I don't necessarily think it is totally about age, but that has to be a part of anybody's, consideration. As spry as he is, the chronology is what it is.
But
So,
I guess Nina, do you think that Democrats will have to, in some way, embrace those socialism, or I guess however you want to phrase it, those truly progressive values? And what I also mean by that is, do you think, like, for example, if you have a moderate as the head of the ticket, do you think it's almost a necessity that you have to give progressives that VP nod?
yeah, Drew, I do, especially if they want to win a primary. And I'm glad you kind of reframed it a little bit. When I think about democratic socialism, it's not the type of socialism in Europe, the way that people are thinking about it. It is really just expanding the social guarantees, universal health care, which Medicare for All polls very well among all Americans by name. So the question becomes, is that some progressive thing, or is that something that Americans want? Every industrialized nation has some type of universal health care, except for the United States of America. Child care, which is killing, people who want that's a family value. So what I would say to my family values party, the GOP, why wouldn't we want that as a social contract? So Drew, yes, I believe that anybody that wants to capture the imagination of the American people are going to have to assess the collective suffering and suffocation of everyday working class people, whether they're Democrat or Republican. Let us not forget President Trump ran on a type of economic populism. Now, he's definitely not a Democratic, he doesn't necessarily, he's not a Democratic socialist, but he did run on economic populism.
Drew, thank you so much. Great
Yeah,
question.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Margaret, come in, unmute yourself, tell us where you are and what is on your mind in regards to 2028.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm in Southern Nevada, and I've been on both the morning meeting and two-way tonight before, so it's great to be here with all of you.
To have you.
And since we've got a couple of New Yorkers here, I want to throw out an interesting scenario, or potentially interesting scenario. Let's say Mamdani loses to Adams, because frankly, I think that that is quite likely. Mamdani, I'm pronouncing that wrong, Mamdani lost the Black vote and the Hispanic vote nearly 2-1. And I don't see, if Adams is running, I don't see how that translates into the general election. Let's say that I'm correct. How does that affect the 2028?
Great question. Robby, you want to take this?
Yeah, I think that's a potential scenario. If Cuomo stays out of the general election, if Curtis Sliwa is somehow convinced to endorse Eric Adams and stay out, then you might have a real contest. Also, Democrats could just do something to undermine Mamdani because they don't like him or they think he's too extreme. That could happen. I take go ahead.
Sorry, don't you think that the Democratic Party might even split between Adams and Mamdani?
Oh, for sure.
I think so. Eric Adams was a Democrat until recently. Now, he's not without his own problems as well. I'm glad I don't live in New York. I would be so over all of these people. I'd be like, are you kidding me?
You and me both, friend.
I think there's a difference between leaning into some policies that get identified with socialism. I never make the mistake of thinking what I think is good policy is necessarily politically popular. Like, yes, if you call it Obamacare, it polls badly, but if you call it the Affordable Care Act, it polls well. If you say, it depends how you phrase these things. Voters generally want more social services for them and people who look like them, and not for, welfare moochers. And they want to raise taxes on the wealthy, but they don't want their own taxes to go up, even if they don't realize they're in a bracket where their taxes would be affected by that same policy. People don't, want smaller government, but then they want the government to provide great services. And it's just kind of all irrational. So if you call expansions of the welfare state and giving, more resources to people, if you call that socialism, people don't like it. I don't know why democratic socialists want to refer to the thing they want as socialism, which calls to mind, regimes from the 20th century that not only just redistributed resources, but, seized control of the political system and outlawed rival parties and did all sorts of repressive things. Even when the general economic policies that they want, some of those things are popular. Now, I still think they would be bad ideas, but if they run on that and don't call it socialism, I think the Democratic Party could be pretty formidable. If they refer to it as socialism, then it's not.
I think what Margaret's asking is, if Mamdani loses, do the Democrats then back off? Dan, do you think they go to the center and they say, oh, we were wrong, this is a losing message? Or do you think they keep pursuing the economic populism?
And who becomes the front runner?
Yeah, I don't think it will. I don't think New York will settle that debate. I think this debate will go into 2026 in terms of all these primaries. And I think it will go into 2028 because historically in our party, we have flirted with the progressive, but we have kind of gone back to the safe shoe at the last second. I mean, look, some of that, Nina, obviously was the party kind of doing what it did behind the scenes. I totally get it. But go back to John Kerry, they flirted with Howard Dean and they went back to Kerry. I don't know. I think it is possible that Adams wins. I think Mamdani is the favorite. I think you are right, where in neighborhoods with working class families with children, Cuomo did better. So in southeastern Brooklyn, in eastern Queens, in the Bronx, you know, the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Staten Island. But I still think Mamdani is the favorite. I don't think it will settle it. But if he loses and he kind of like just collapses, yeah, I mean, moderates will spike the football, but they'd be dumb to do it.
I mean,
Nina,
there's some contours here. I mean, Cuomo is the name that is known. So when people
Totally.
up the Hispanic community or the portions of the African American community, let us not forget that is a whole deeper, more complex conversation, Margaret.
well,
But
let's talk about that. I mean, because
But-
Sanders also struggled with Black voters, and between 2016 and 2020, he only improved by 1 point. What talk to us about the progressive problem attracting the exact voters they claim to be representing?
Well, Batya, again, we can't compare. I mean, there's some similarities, and the reason why I'm saying that is that don't forget Senator Sanders, a senator from Vermont, who had never taken a national stage, running against the Clintons. So it's not exact. People are creatures of habit. So even if they like those policies, they're kind of like, well, I don't know about this Senator Sanders, but I do know the Clintons or anybody else that were in those races. Now, when we get to 2020, it pains me to hear you say he only went up. I mean, we were out there working our behinds off to both continue to introduce him to people and his concept and the construct. Running against the entire Democratic machine, we did extraordinarily well. And I am proud of what he gained coming from 2016 to 2020. So there's some contours here. I don't believe that Mamdani's win changes the intrinsic political feelings or mode of operandi for the Democratic Party. In other words, I think this is a false equivalency. They may concede that Mamdani won, they being the neoliberals who have most of the power. They will concede his win, but the party as a whole, the leadership, not necessarily the people, are not going to wholesale adopt his way of politics. They're already scratching and banging their heads up against the wall right now that he did win.
Margaret, thank you so much. Let's get James in. James, tell us where you are and what's on your mind vis-a-vis 2028. And Emma Jo, why don't you take this one?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm in West Hartford, Connecticut. Love the show. I've called
Nice.
into all versions of the two-way show. You know, I have a couple of things. One, I just want to react to the Mamdani thing for a moment. And so I'm a Republican. My number one voting issue is appointing federal judges that will limit administrative law, right? So maybe I'm a libertarian, I don't know. But the Republicans need to be very careful with how, you know, I'm watching them in this sort of orgiastic glee that this guy has won. And, you know, to Nina's point about people are hurting, and to Emma's point that we are in a time of rapid change, and that makes everybody uncomfortable except those rare few at the very top, right? And I just think that the Republicans are making a mistake not listening to what he's speaking to. And what he is speaking to in a time of rapid change that we're in, everybody feels a bit destabilized, no matter how, other than the rare few who are extremely secure. Everybody, from I would say the upper middle class down, feels destabilized.
Even the upper class feels destabilized by AI. They do.
Yes, I agree. Now that said, I think, and then I want to throw one compliment, and then my question. The great thing when listening to Emma and Nina, I'm 63. This reminds me of when we used to agree about the problems and have different solutions to get to them, and we could argue principally about the solutions. So that makes me so hopeful for the future. So as I see it, and I'm going to ask you guys this question, as I see it, probably the economy and the markets will do well for 4 years. The rate of technological change and change in, you know, reindustrialization and all of the problems that come with it, like they're building a factory in my town and it takes me longer to get to work now, right? Like all of these problems that are going to lead to people being a little bit more unsettled. And the fact that we now need authenticity because of platforms like this and podcasts, we need to see the actual candidate for who the person is rather than whether or not they're slick and can deliver a great speech. I'm saying if that's the backdrop, I think the winning candidate has to be able to harken back to a time when we felt more secure, have enough chops to be able to explain the benefits of this technological change that's occurring and why it's going to be good for them. And more importantly, how they're going to be able to manage it so that people don't get crushed and the social contract is completely shredded. And of the people out there, I think JD could do that. I don't know the Democrats so well. I think JD could do that. I do not think Secretary Rubio can do that. And I'm not quite sure there's any other national Republican that can do that. But my question is, if I'm right, or we deal with that as a hypothetical, what Democrat is out there that can give us a touchstone to the secure past that we had, understand the complexity that's going on, and make people feel safe that they can manage it?
So Emma, respond to everything James said, and then Robby, I want you to answer his question about which Democrat. Go ahead, Emma.
Okay.
Great
Well,
comments, James.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you so much for the compliment, by the way. I'm so touched by that. And I agree. And because I have that perspective, and like, I think me and Nina disagree about solutions, but we are aligned basically 100% about what problems are. Nina, you can tell me if you disagree with that, but I think that said, the Democrat that's going to be the most formidable candidate, which is why I said Ro Khanna when I was asked who would scare me at the beginning of the show, is that, like, the most formidable candidate for Democrats, I think, will be the candidate that, like, as Nina said, and I obviously agree with that, understands and has their arms around economic populism. And obviously that person will have to as well incorporate the disruption from advancements in tech. I was just, Republicans and the way that they're grappling with this, I don't, listen, it's very revealing, because the Republicans that are screaming about socialism or whatever, those are the Republicans that don't get it and are not going to make it. They are just not going to make it, because they are not able to face what the next generation, and honestly, I think the current generation of the Democratic Party, i.e. their opponents, are, and how, frankly, how appealing their ideas are. And, you're not going to tell somebody who has like 3 maxed out credit cards that, they got to pick themselves up by the bootstraps. It's a really stupid position to take, and to try to just smear the person who is addressing that by calling them like a communist or whatever, like, it's like so stupid, like that. Just, you'll just lose. And the radical left, like, that language, that's got to go. That's just got to go. It's very weak. It's totally impotent. And frankly, it's a compliment at this point in some cases, especially like in terms of on economic issues, which what else do we care about? It's the economic issues are first and foremost, obviously. So, calling somebody a socialist and okay, like, sorry, but like, it's not 1982. Like, can you stop?
Robby, as someone who does not like socialism, respond to what Emma just
Sorry,
said.
Robby. Except for you.
Needless to say, I disagree completely with that from beginning to end. You can be tactful when you talk about, yes, people who are in medical debt or credit card debt or even student loan debt. Still, at the end of the day, I am utterly opposed completely with all of my faculties bailing people out for taking out college loans and making other people who made more financially intelligent choices for their futures, and to expect them to pay for people who got the full college experience and then maybe didn't finish the diploma and are now in a difficult situation, make other people pay for that. I will fight it every single time, and I'll fight it in all other contexts. We cannot have sound and solid policy if we're a nation of entitlement and trying to bail people out. I do not believe it is government's role to protect you from the negative consequences of your own bad decision making. If I was, I would be a Democrat. And the Republican Party must stand for something against those ideas, or it might as well quit, go home, and join in with the people who are going to wreck the economy of this country.
Saving
Robby,
great
I don't
women-
disagree with you. I'm just saying that the
Wait,
populist
let's let
left
Nina
is
weigh
very
in.
appealing.
Nina, weigh in, and then Dan.
I'm so glad that Robby and I do agree that the government should have never bailed out Wall Street, that the banks were not too big to fail. See, I'm gonna go with Robby and I do agree, because
Correct.
corporate welfare is okay with some folks. The PPP loans were okay, but let us not talk about giving some relief to students who have debt. The entire college system itself is rigged, because no one should have to go broke just because they're trying to better their lives. That is the reason why most people go to college. So let's talk about how the federal government configured it in the first place. The social contract is important, and we should be reimagining what a social contract looks like in the 21st century.
Dan.
I'll just add, I know we're
For
getting,
us and wrap us up.
yeah, we're getting close to time. I'm a little more with Robby about the government stepping involved. Look, I actually think Trump is an extremely activist government. He is sticking the government into a lot of situations, whether it's speech, universities, companies, what they should and should not do, who raises prices, who does what. Like, it is almost on some level socialist the way he tries to use the bully pulpit and the power of government. Look, on college loans, only about 35% of Americans go to college. As a Democrat, I remember, like, when Biden was leaning into this, it was so unpopular with the working class who doesn't go to college, who said, why are you bailing them out? Where is your version of that for me? And it was a devastating attack line against us in a lot of elections. So, to be continued. I think we're going to hear a lot more about this in both parties.
To be continued. So just to summarize the news that was made here, Steve Bannon, keep your eye on him.
Yeah.
The Honorable Nina Turner, keep your eye on her, possibly with a campaign run by one Emma Jo Morris. You heard it here first. Thank you, everybody, for joining our special edition on 2028. Please like and subscribe and join us every Thursday, 4 p.m. at the Two-Way platform. Thank you for joining. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time. Bye.